The routine of a life lived well does not feel like choice. It feels like gravity. It is the low hum beneath conversation, the steady rhythm of consumption, the automatic reaching for the device when silence arrives. Most people move through their days following tracks worn deep into the landscape, paths that others blazed long ago and that they never stopped to question. This ingrained habit of moving without conscious direction suggests a deeper failure than mere distraction. It points toward a profound surrender of agency. We are so accustomed to the sheer efficiency of autopilot living that we forget the effort required to simply be present, to observe, to feel, to truly decide where the next breath should lead us. What if this automated existence is not merely a lack of focus, but an active withdrawal from the difficult work of self-definition? The fundamental question is whether modern life has made sustained intentionality too costly, forcing humanity into the smooth, predictable glide of the well-worn track. I propose that living on autopilot is not simply a flaw in attention. It is a deeply ingrained form of preemptive comfort, an escape from the terrifying weight of radical freedom. The philosophical tradition offers few simple answers, but Martin Heidegger gives us a crucial concept, Dasein. He called this being there, our everyday existence, the state of falling or falling into things. Falling is not a mistake. It is simply how we usually live. We are always lost in the crowd, absorbed by the immediate needs of work, family logistics, and digital notifications. Heidegger argued that this absorption causes us to lose touch with what he called authentic existence, the self confronting its own inevitable end. Instead, we engage with the they-self, or does man. To live according to the self means doing what everyone else does. It is adopting the consensus of the group as if it were an objective truth about reality itself. We speak like the they say, buy what the they recommend, and schedule our lives around the expectations of the collective flow. This isn't malice. It is a sophisticated form of social lubrication that allows us to maintain cohesion without ever having to face the messy singularity of individual desire or unique moral choice. This surrender to the self creates a deep blindness to possibility because possibility requires confrontation with the self, and the self is fundamentally inconvenient. To be truly present means acknowledging the sheer weight of one's own capacity for action, the ability not just to participate, but to initiate something entirely new. That weight is terrifying. It demands that we stand alone, stripped of the familiar chorus of consensus opinion or routine expectation. The autopilot life serves as a perfect emotional anesthetic against this terror. We build elaborate systems of meaning around work titles, relationship milestones, and consumption habits simply because these structures provide predictable boundaries. They tell us where the tracks end, and therefore they assure us that we will not fall into the infinite expanse of genuine possibility. The complication arises when we recognize that autonomy is not merely an internal state. It requires radical effort against powerful external forces. We treat freedom like a destination, as if choosing to be fully present means achieving some perfect equilibrium, a quiet moment on a mountain peak. But true self-definition demands friction. It means deliberately opting for the inefficiency of deep contemplation over the effortless speed of reaction. This is where we must look at Stoicism, particularly Epictetus, who taught that our suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our judgment about those events. The autopilot mind simply executes judgments. This email means I must respond by noon. This cue means I am late and failing, without the pause necessary for examination. We treat our immediate feelings as objective reality and act upon them without filtering them through a disciplined philosophical lens. To break the cycle is not to suddenly quit everything, but to build intentional gaps into the routine flow of life. It means creating moments where the default mechanism fails. A brief moment in a quiet room with no expected input, walking down an unfamiliar street simply because it looks interesting, even if your GPS directs you elsewhere, pausing before replying to an email to ask, is this necessary? Does this reflect my own deepest concern, or merely the urgency assigned to me by the self? These pauses are not philosophical exercises for show. They are acts of resistance against entropy. They force us back into the singular self, demanding that we account for our actions and intentions as if no one else were watching, even when everyone is doing exactly what we do. When we start to see the routine, the morning ritual, the commute, the consumption cycle, not as necessary steps, but as assembled choices, something shifts in the weight of those movements. The mundane track suddenly appears less like a natural path and more like an accumulation of soft compromises. The realization is that this predictable comfort, which once felt safe, was only ever a form of highly sophisticated surrender. Gravity remains constant, pulling us toward the lowest, easiest point, but now we recognize the pull for what it is, an invitation to inaction. The weight of consciousness does not demand perfect control, it demands recognition of choice. It asks us to acknowledge that between the gravitational pull of habit and the immense, terrifying upward push of genuine self-determination, there exists a narrow window defined only by the decision to pause. But what does this pausing look like in practice? It is perhaps the hardest question of all, because the inertia we are fighting isn't just a habit, it's an entire infrastructure built out of convenience. We have become experts at optimization, optimizing our schedules, optimizing our routines, even optimizing our emotional responses, all to minimize friction and maximize perceived safety. This deep comfort is seductive precisely because it requires nothing from us except the continuation of the previous moment. To stop, therefore, feels less like taking a breath and more like standing on the precipice of an abyss. The path out, the genuine upward climb towards self-determination, is inherently uncomfortable. It demands that we embrace inefficiency, the hours spent reading books unrelated to our careers, the conversations that challenge our foundational beliefs, the commitments that feel too risky or inconvenient right now. We must tolerate the state of being unoptimized. This means accepting the messy, contradictory nature of growth. It doesn't arrive as a sudden epiphany under a perfect sky. It arrives through persistent micro-rebellions against our own established patterns. It is found in the small, agonizing moments when we look at something, a relationship, a career path, a pattern of spending money, and realize that while it works perfectly fine, it doesn't actually feel like us. Most people live on autopilot not because they are incapable of choice, but because they have calculated that the immediate cost of choosing is higher than the cumulative psychological toll of inaction. The risk-reward calculation favors stability over fulfillment every time. We trade potential joy for predictable peace, and this calculus is flawlessly logical, which makes it so deeply tragic. So if the problem is the illusion of safety inherent in routine, and the solution lies in persistent discomfort, how do we even begin? We don't have to overhaul our entire lives tomorrow. The revolution starts with noticing. It begins by identifying those moments when your internal compass gives a slight, anxious twitch. The moment you are about to say yes, because it's easier than saying no, or the time you scroll past an article that makes you feel slightly unsettled, but undeniably correct. These little flickers of resistance are not failures, they are signals. They are the faint whisper of the self trying to wake up. If we recognize this constant gravitational pull toward the easiest option, we can start treating it like what it is, a powerful suggestion, not an unbreakable law. We stop viewing our autopilot existence as an immutable state of being and begin seeing it instead as merely a habit, a highly successful but entirely reversible mechanical process. And maybe that is enough. Maybe knowing the direction available is enough to start moving. It doesn't require grand gestures or sweeping life changes. It just requires acknowledging that the decision itself is always ours. That between the effortless slide back into the familiar routine and the difficult climb toward a more authentic self, there is only the quiet possibility of a choice made simply for the sake of being truly awake.